Hello and welcome to DOZ Monologues, hosted by Eturuvie Erebor. DOZ Monologues, also known as DOZ Chronicles Audio Stories, aims to educate, inspire and drive societal change. All stories are written and narrated by Eturuvie Erebor, and all rights are reserved, including the right of reproduction in whole or in part in any form. This is episode 3, titled Nurse Nelo. If you're listening on YouTube, please subscribe, like and share. Thank you. Nurse Nelo. Have you ever had one of those days when everything seems to go wrong? A day where you're reminded at every turn of your vulnerability as a woman, and how society not only places you at the bottom and enables evil against you, but also how in a society like Nigeria and Africa you have no voice. Well, today was one of those days for me. Before I launch into a tirade and tell you everything that went wrong, let me introduce myself. I am Chinelo, Nelo for short. To my family, friends and patients, I am affectionately known as Nurse Chinelo. And you guessed right, I am a registered nurse. I left home early this morning, but I didn't go straight to work. There were some personal matters requiring my attention, so I had taken permission to resume my shift a couple of hours late. First, I went to the bank to resolve an issue with my bank card, which was preventing me from making withdrawals. I arrived at the bank and joined the long queue that stretched across the banking hall from the man-trap security doors to the customer service desk. People often say I am a beautiful and well-endowed woman because of my well-rounded bum, which contrasts with my slim waist, giving me the perfect hourglass figure, and all for free. I have never had to do a Brazilian butt lift or squats. My figure has always attracted men, and my face has also received many compliments, as has my thick, long natural hair, which falls easily over my shoulders. There has always been a steady stream of men interested in dating and marrying me. While in nursing school, I dated a lot. However, since resuming work as a qualified nurse and midwife more than 3 years ago, and now being past 25 years of age, I have taken a step back and only consider men who are serious prospects with marriage in mind. Anyway, back to my day. I arrived at the bank and joined the long line. As we slowly moved toward the customer service desk, a man joined the queue directly behind me. I knew when he joined, because even though there was no reason for him to be so close to me, he chose to move so close that I felt his manhood against my bum crack. As soon as I had the chance, I moved forward, believing that he would avoid getting so close to me when he moved. But he didn't. He moved and planted his manhood right on my bum crack as though it belonged there. I shut my eyes, took in a deep breath, and counted to 10. And fortunately, the line began to move before I was done counting. Relieved, I moved forward again, creating distance between us, hoping that this time when he advanced he would also create a little distance. Even a small distance would have ensured that he wasn't in my personal space and I didn't feel his manhood pressing against my bum crack. But he didn't. Once I felt his manhood in my bum crack, I turned to him, looking at him for the first time. He was a barrister. I could tell from his attire which comprised cut trousers and a bib. In a low tone, I said, "Sir, please, when I move forward again, could you allow a bit of space between us?" Instantly, he shouted at the top of his voice, drawing attention from others in the banking hall. "What do you mean by that? You are very rude. How dare you speak to me like that? Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are talking to? You are badly behaved. You were not raised properly." I was very disappointed that a lawyer acted in such an unprofessional manner. Belatedly, I realized I was dealing with an unreasonable person, so I stepped out of the line and walked beside my empty space to the customer service desk. That was just the beginning of my ruined day, and if I thought it was the end, I was sadly mistaken. Once the issue with my ATM card was fixed, I made a withdrawal using the ATMs outside the bank and took a taxi to the house I planned to rent. It was a lovely 2-bedroom flat in a better area than where I currently lived. In every way, it was an upgrade, as my current apartment was a 1-bedroom flat in a not so great area of town. However, I liked it because it was near the private hospital where I worked and had been handed over to me by my older brother when he was leaving the country for the US. There was no problem with the place, but I felt I had outgrown it and wanted something better, even if it was a little further away from my workplace. The housing agent I engaged had shown me different properties, and I finally chose this one because I fell in love with it at first sight. I was meeting the agent and the landlord to make a payment, which was why I went to use the ATM at the bank after resolving the issue with my ATM card. When I arrived at the property, the agent was waiting for me, but the landlord was nowhere to be seen, although that didn't trouble me as I knew he lived on the vast estate with more than a dozen flats. I noticed the agent appeared unhappy as I approached and greeted him, so I asked if he was okay. I also inquired about the landlord's whereabouts. "Nurse Nelo, please forget about this house," he said, instead of telling me what the problem was. "Let me help you look for another one." I frowned, wondering what nonsense he was talking about. This was a house we had already agreed on, and the landlord had requested a cash payment, which is why I had gone to make a withdrawal. "Why? What's going on?" I asked. "The landlord says he has changed his mind and doesn't want to give his house to a single woman." "Why?" "He says single women are prostitutes, and he doesn't want you bringing men to the flat since he and his family also live in the premises. He fears you will be a bad influence on his young daughters." I took in a deep breath. What could I say in response to what I had been told? I had heard stories about single women being turned down when they wanted to rent houses. I had never had the experience because, like I said, my current place was my brother's and I moved in with him, and he left me in the flat when going abroad, and I have been there since paying the rent. This was my first attempt to find a place for myself, and I had encountered the much talked about problem. I found myself pondering how someone could judge a woman's behavior solely based on her marital status, especially without knowing her at all. I stood there for a long time, unsure of what to do or say next. "Don't worry, I will help you find a place where you won't face this problem," the agent, who had become friendly with me while assisting in my house search, tried to reassure me. "In the worst case scenario, we can create a fake marriage certificate." I released a humorless laugh, the kind that echoed the tension in the air. "Really?" I asked. And who will be my husband? Your brother, who is in the US. He will handle the rental process, and the landlord will believe that you are a married woman with a husband living abroad. I don't know why I didn't think of that before now. The agent seemed to have everything figured out. I smiled and shook my head. I had to lie and forge a marriage certificate, pretending to have a husband just to be allowed to rent a place to stay. I wasn't prepared to do that. You know what? I need to go to work now since the landlord has changed his mind. I will call you once I have decided how I want to proceed. We parted ways, and as I headed to my workplace, I reflected on what had transpired. I decided to stay in the one-bedroom flat where I was living. No one was forcing me to leave. I planned to renew the rent with the money I had withdrawn from the bank, which would pleasantly surprise the landlord. For now, I wouldn't look for a new place to live. When I arrived at work, I was assigned tasks immediately. A colleague informed me that a patient had asked to see me, so I went in search of him after I had signed in. He was a man in his mid-60s who was brought in for a hernia operation a few days ago. The operation was successfully completed the day after his admission, and he was recovering. Although he was not directly under my care, he was always asking for me. He told me that Nurse Lucy, who was responsible for his care, was very rude and not as caring as I was. He told his family that I went above and beyond to ensure his comfort from the moment he was admitted. His wife and children expressed their heartfelt appreciation during their visit. "My dear Nurse Nelo, where have you been?" he asked as I approached his bed in the male ward on the first floor. "I expected you to come and see me as you usually do when you resume for your shift." I smiled and apologized, explaining that I had been out to handle some personal matters before resuming that morning, hence I was only coming in. He went on to tell me that he wanted the doctor to release him to go home because he was unhappy. He mentioned that the night before he had asked Lucy to check on his stitches, which were scheduled for removal that morning. She had threatened to slap him if he didn't stop calling for her. My surprise was palpable, evident in the expression that stole across my face. Whatever had possessed Lucy to speak to a patient like that? I had heard multiple reports that she was rude to patients, and once I confronted her about it, she was so disrespectful to me that I let her be. However, this situation was unacceptable, and I considered reporting Lucy to the nurse in charge of the night shift, or the matron. A few months ago, another colleague who had since left the hospital told me that Lucy had been sleeping with Dr. Rotimi Ajayi, the medical director and owner of the hospital. I had shut down the conversation at the time because I didn't want to encourage gossip. But I had also observed Lucy's behavior, and I had to admit that there might be some truth to the allegation. Staff and patients complained about her so frequently that if she was still working in the hospital, there would have to be only one reason for it. I apologized to the patient and assured him that I would report the matter. The doctor had taken his stitches out that morning, according to him, but wanted him to remain for one more day to observe him. I promised I would ensure that when Nurse Lucy came in for the night shift, she would not be allowed to care for him. He appreciated my understanding, and I went to check on my patients, only to be interrupted before I was done by a colleague. "Dr. Rotimi wants to see you in his office now," she said, and walked away before I could ask her why he had sent for me. I walked out of the female ward and down the hall towards his office, wondering why he wanted to see me and why it couldn't wait. "You were late this morning," he said as I entered his office. "Shut the door behind you," he added. "Yes, sir." I entered and shut the door behind me. "Why were you late for your shift?" "Sir, I requested permission from the head of admin to address some personal matters this morning, and it was approved. I arrived at the time I had communicated I would resume today." "I see," he said, looking up from his computer and standing up. "So how are you?" I frowned, wondering where he was going with this. I had been called away from my patient so he could know how I am. "I am fine, sir." He smiled and covered the distance between us. "You seem surprised," he said. "Don't you know how beautiful you are, especially this morning? Don't you know that I like you?" My heart raced, and I stepped back as he placed his hand on my shoulder. "You should know that I like you. From the moment you started working here, I have not been able to take my eyes off you." "Sir," I began and paused, unsure what to say next, as he gently caressed my shoulder. "You are a very beautiful woman, Nelo," he continued. "Your shape drives me crazy. I can't hide it again. I want you, desperately. Feel my desire for you." I stood speechless and immobile, shocked. But as he took my hand and tried to bring it closer to his manhood, which was now bulging from the front of his trousers, I screamed, "No!" I yanked my hand free, turned around, and fled from his office. I entered the restroom and hid there for 10 minutes, trying to compose myself before checking on my patients. When I was done with my patients, a little girl of about 7 years of age was brought in by her mother for treatment. The mother was weeping uncontrollably and was in worse shape than the girl, as she explained to me how her younger brother, who lived with her and whom she was sponsoring through university, had been sexually abusing her little daughter. She had not known until that morning, when she had tried to bathe the girl and the girl had cried out because of the pain in her vagina. I treated the girl and counseled the weeping mother, who was not only distraught for her daughter but also fearful of what would happen to her and her marriage if she told her husband what she had discovered. Their visit took longer than usual for a day patient, but I was happy I had been able to calm the mother and ensure she understood how to administer the medication to her daughter at home. I had not completed the tasks assigned to me that morning because of the time I spent with mother and child, but as it was time for my lunch break, I decided to go for lunch. But first, I went in search of matron to report Nurse Lucy's rudeness to the elderly male patient the night before. As I left matron's office, the medical director, Dr. Rotimi, walked past and said, "Nurse Nelo, my office now." I was shocked by his tone and wondered what the problem was, but I decided to go with him to find out. "Why are you neglecting patients?" he backed out as soon as I entered his office. "Neglecting patients?" I asked, surprised. "Sir, I can assure you I have neglected no one. I saw all my patients upon arrival this morning. I even saw some patients belonging to other nurses." "And the last hour or so?" "Sir, I was with a patient who came in with her daughter for treatment." "And how long does it take to attend to one patient?" "Sir, it wasn't one patient. Besides, the mother was distraught and..." "Was it the mother or daughter who required treatment?" "Sir, it was the daughter." "Then why were you wasting time chatting away with the mother?" he asked. "I wasn't wasting time, and I certainly wasn't chatting with the mother. Are you saying that I am lying? I saw you talking with a woman for over half an hour. You were chatting and neglecting your patients. Sir, with all due respect, what you saw was a woman receiving counseling. She was traumatized. Her daughter had been. Before I finished, he had slapped me hard across the face. Are you mad? He asked, raising his voice. How dare you talk back when I am talking? Is it because I said I like you? You think you can talk to me as you like? He slapped me again. I grabbed his shirt and tie. I knew my strength was no match for his, but I would tear his shirt, scratch his face, bite his hand. Whatever I could do, I will do. I wasn't going to let him manhandle me without reacting. Sir, why are you beating me? I shouted to ensure everyone knew I was being assaulted. Is it because I refused your sexual advances? I came here to do a job, and I have done that to the best of my ability. Why are you hitting me? I was on the verge of tears as I contemplated a country where women could not perform their jobs and return home without the fear of being assaulted in the workplace. To summarize, we had a fight in his office where I tore his shirt, pinched his face, and beat his hands. He would need to explain a lot to his wife upon returning home. He would likely tell her I am a lunatic who attacked him because I was denied a pay raise. I chuckled at the thought of it. As we fought, he shouted at the top of his voice for security, and the security guard came and carried me out of the office. As I was carried out, he shouted at the top of his lungs, "Throw her out! She is fired! I never want to see her in these premises again." The security man put me outside the gate and went back inside to retrieve my handbag and other belongings. When he returned, he went on his knees before me. "Nurse Nelo, please forgive me. I know you were wronged, but I am only trying to keep my job." "That's fine, Andrew," I said, and walked away without a backwards glance. What a day. From being sexually harassed by a complete stranger in the bank and shouted down when I expressed my displeasure, to being sexually harassed by my boss and beaten up when I refused his advances. All in one day. Was it a crime to be a woman? Why did some men look at a woman as though she was one big sex organ and existed only to fulfill their sexual desire? As if she were not a human being, as though she were not deserving of any dignity or respect. I chuckled dryly. It was overwhelming for me to process. I will think about it tomorrow. The end. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of episode 3 of DOZ Monologues. DOZ Monologues will return next week with another episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave your comments and subscribe, like, and share if listening on YouTube. To contact me, please visit my website eturuvie.com or email me at eturuvie@eturuvieerebor.com. I invite all story lovers to explore my novels and novellas available on Amazon and Google Books. For audio enthusiasts, they are also on Audible. Thank you for listening. I am your favorite storyteller, Eturuvie Erebor, and I'll be here next Friday with another story.